All right, beautiful people. This week we have a very special episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality Show. I have Willie McKenzie, the CEO of Left Coast Holdings and the founder of the Eco Elite Cannabis Operators Mastermind. That is actually where we met. I became a member of that when I got back into the cannabis industry. And we talk about family, we talk about addiction and recovery and what it's like to start just from ground zero more than once in our lives. And we also talk about our connection to God and source energy and how it guides us, not just in our entrepreneurial endeavors, but how we bring it out into our personal lives as well. And I wanted to thank everyone who has been leaving comments, who has been subscribing and hitting the notification bell. All of that really helps. So if you enjoying this podcast, please leave a comment, please leave a review, and let's go ahead and jump into the podcast. Yes. All right. What's up, everybody? It is Seibo Shen with another episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality Show. This week, I have a very special guest, my good friend, Willie McKenzie. Willie, can you say hello to everyone?
What's going on, guys? Thank you for having me, Seibo. Grateful to see you as always.
Yeah. All right. So Willie and I, we have built a good friendship over the last few months, and we're involved in a whole bunch of projects together. But instead of me talking about Willie, do you mind introducing yourself to the audience? Talk about a little bit about your background, what you do, and then we'll jump into the podcast.
Sure. So, Willie McKenzie, I am CEO of Left Coast Holdings, which is a vertically integrated cannabis company based in Michigan. My background is in construction and the legacy cannabis market. I've been in the regulated market since 2019. That is how I met you, Seibo, is obviously through cannabis connections. And I also have a community that I founded in September of last year called the Elite Cannabis Operators Mastermind, where we bring cannabis operators together to support each other, share best practices. And that's one of the things that you and I are working on together in my passion project.
Yeah. The Elite Cannabis Operators is a mastermind for people in the cannabis industry. As we all know, the cannabis industry is a challenging one. I myself burnt out back in 2020, took a 3-year hiatus and then rejoined the company, or rejoined the industry. One of the things that really stood out to me when I got back on LinkedIn and started to just get reacquainted with the industry, I saw a lot of your posts and you would talk a lot about entrepreneurship, but you would also really talk about, in my opinion, how to have a holistic lifestyle where you weren't just burning the midnight oil at your company and at your professional endeavors, but really also prioritizing family and the things that are really important in your life. And I had the benefit of listening to you talk about your past and your recovery. Would you mind sharing with the audience a little bit about where you were? You talked about being in construction, but yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing kind of your addiction story and how far you've come, I think that would really set the tone for what we're about to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I come from a family where addiction is very common, and I was a functional alcoholic and addict for many years, teens and 20s. I, on the outside, presented a very good, successful picture to the world, but inside, behind closed doors, I was an addict and I was dying. I was killing myself slowly. And I got to a point in my late 20s where I got into opiates. And if you've ever known somebody who with an opiate addiction, it's a fast downward spiral. And so I got to a point where I had lost everything due to my addiction. I lost my business. I had built a really great construction company with a childhood best friend. I lost that. I lost a girl. I lost my house. My truck got repossessed. I had literally nothing left. And so I went and spent 6 months at an inpatient rehab facility and I restarted my life in my 30s. And some of the stuff that you were talking about, maybe me talking about entrepreneurship and just being willing to be more vulnerable than maybe some other people are, it stems from that, right? I've spent the months and hours and in group sessions dumping my guts in front of people. And so I'm probably a little bit more comfortable with it than other people are because of that. And so today I've been sober for 12 years.
Mm. Wow. Wow, and I love the story about you rebuilding your business, and would you mind sharing a little bit about how you transitioned from construction into the cannabis space? Because I think those are some pretty important details about I don't wanna jump into it, I'd rather you tell the stories, but I think there were some important lessons about building that really great construction business and then deciding to go into cannabis.
Yeah, for sure. Cannabis was a side hustle for me throughout my entire life. I started selling when I was in high school. I sold through college. I started growing in 2006. And so I always had a construction business, and then I was growing and distributing on the side. And I got to a point after I got sober, I got back into cannabis cultivation. We went up north, bought some property, and started growing outdoors. And I got to a point where I realized that my my business at that time wasn't fully aligned with my goals. That I had two partners, we saw things differently. I had bigger goals, bigger ambitions. I was willing to take bigger risks than they were. And it was a little bit, I felt unsettled and bored and unfulfilled. And so that side hustle became my outlet. And so I wound up going from one outdoor farm up in the hills to having four outdoor farms up in the hills. And that is really what set me up to make it my full time gig and to have this decent sized vertical operation here in Michigan that has survived quite a bit of volatility in the market here.
Yeah, what's amazing to me is that you lost everything, you came out of addiction, you had nothing, you built this really great business and then got bored with it and decided to walk away. Most people, I think that when they lose everything, rebuild everything, there is like this really strong attachment to making sure like whatever you rebuilt doesn't crumble, but you were willing to walk away. You got bored, you had kind of larger aspirations than your partners. And I had also heard you mention that you had a connection to God. Now, as I mentioned, a lot of people who lost everything and then rebuilt would be very scared to lose what they rebuilt. So, what kind of gave you the courage that you could just start over again? And did it have any connection to believing in something greater than yourself?
Yeah, I do believe in God. I believe in the abundance of the universe. I believe that if I continue to put one foot in front of the other and do the next right thing, that God will always provide for me. I won't go without, and it hasn't let me down yet. And so I'll continue to believe that. But we humans get attached to being comfortable, right? My construction company afforded me a very comfortable lifestyle, but it was not fulfilling. And it's hard for people to walk away from a large salary and solid distributions and everything that affords the expense account, all that stuff that I had with that business. It's hard for anybody to walk away from that. It's hard for people who have a salary 9 to 5 job to walk away and start something bigger. But for me, I had this deep seated need to prove to myself or to understand if I had what it took to start something, be the CEO and make it successful. Because in both of my businesses, I've had two successful construction companies. I was never the number one guy. I was always the sales guy. And I was good at it. I'm a good salesman. I build relationships with people and that's made me successful in that role. But I needed to know for myself, was I successful because of me or was I successful because of somebody else? And so this was really my way of putting myself to the test and seeing, do I have what it takes to do this? And yeah, the answer is yes, I can be the number one guy. Certainly not easy. Do I want to be the number one guy forever? I don't know. But it was definitely something that I'm glad I did.
Yeah, me too. When I get asked about when I was a CEO and what my experience was like. Like, it was very challenging. It took a lot away from me. I sacrificed a lot of my time, a lot of my relationships, sometimes even my health. But when I look back, it was something that, it taught me things that I don't think I could have learned in any other predicament other than running the company. And so I'm curious, like, what going from not being the number one guy to the number one guy and feeling, yes, I have what it takes. What are some of your biggest takeaways from being the CEO?
Man, so many things I have learned on this journey. You really have to understand a bit of everything because you can surround yourself with the best of the best, really intelligent people. But if you can't understand what they are saying to you, if you can't at least give them a little bit of direction or interpret the reports that they're giving you, then you're useless, right? You're a figurehead. And so there were things that I had to do in my role. I went to this core program at Harvard and took some accounting classes so that I could understand, what my CFO was telling me. Because in the beginning, we had some big problems with our books and how they were kept, and it ruined a merger for us and kept us from raising money. So things like that, just you really have to understand everything about the business, at least enough to be able to speak about it intelligently. You don't have to be great at it. You really have to be strong when things are tough. The cannabis industry is incredibly challenging, and the people who work in the business get scared, right? The market's bad. They hear horrible things about the cannabis market, and people get scared, and you, as the leader of the company, have to show up every day with a brave face, regardless of how you feel. And there were so many days when I did not feel brave. I still feel like that, but you can't show that, right? You have to show up every day and lead and let people know that, hey, this is okay. We're going to make it through this. And so that's one of the things that was super challenging for me at times. And a reason that I got involved in masterminds was to put myself around guys like you and other executives and founders that I could talk to, people who I could say what I was really feeling, what I was really thinking, because I couldn't share that at work. So that necessity to be brave and lead when things are challenging is another thing that I've come to realize is a big part of being CEO of a company.
Yeah. You talked about being able to express vulnerability and having to share your intimate aspects of your life with groups of people. I'm sure that has helped quite a bit. And one of the things that I often struggle with, Willie, is wanting to be honest and authentic, but also knowing, hey, I'm leading a group of people. And if they knew exactly how I felt, perhaps they would lose confidence, but at the same time, wanting to be honest. So, how do you reconcile that? Because that's something that I've always found challenging, which was showing up and knowing that I'm not feeling great, but also knowing I need to lead and then struggling with how much information should I actually let my team know. So I'm curious how you deal with that.
Yeah, when talking to the teams and in the actual office environment, no vulnerability. That's unfortunately just how it is. And then I look for outlets outside of that, friends, being friends with you, therapy, masterminds. Those are the places where I process how I'm thinking. And then if I'm creating content where I'm getting vulnerable about something, it's got to be framed in a way where the solution has already been arrived at, right? Where I'm not just posing a problem to the world and expressing fear or anxiety or depression or whatever it is. It's presenting the solution to the world. And a lot of times people will say, oh, I really needed to hear that today. And when I write something, it's often what I needed to hear that day. I've just already come to whatever the solution is. And so I'm sharing the solution, and the vulnerability is associated with it.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction, which is being able to show vulnerability, but not slide into that area of victimhood, right? Because I think it's important to be able to discuss and display emotions, but I've also seen the inverse, which is almost too much emotion. And then it falls into what I perceive to be victimhood, which then to me looks like someone is almost disempowering themselves versus being able to disclose like what is bothering themselves and then looking for some sort of solution or advice. And it sounds like your process when you create content is to think about what you're going through, what's challenging you, and then how you're working through it, and then share that with the world. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. And it helps me process the things that I'm going through, right? Because, like you said, I'm not here to dump or play the victim, but we're all going through shit, no matter who you are, no matter what your position is. The president of the United States, the CEO of a Fortune 50 company, everybody has shit in their lives. Everybody has problems, everybody has pain. And so being able to process those things and present a solution to them for me feels healthy. And then also to people has gotten good results, right? People react well to it. And I also think that it's important to me. I'm really passionate about men's issues, and men have been trained, conditioned to be stoic, to never show weakness, to stuff their emotions. And I think it's important to share that it's okay not to be okay. Like, we're all going through shit. And I think that coming from me with my past and maybe the way that I look, that the message kind of lands differently with people, some specific sort of men like me, right? The guys that I'm speaking to a lot of times when I'm writing stuff like that is it's me 5 years ago or it's me 2 years ago. And I think it lands better than it coming from somebody who maybe looks different, a softer um, tone from somebody, right? Because I have a background that is it's hardcore. Some of the shit I've been through is really hardcore, and so like the recovery style that works for me is hardcore, right? It doesn't work for everybody. It's not like hand holding. You're gonna feel better. We're gonna make this better. It's no fucking hold yourself accountable. Grab your fucking self by your bootstraps and get up and let's go because we got fucking work to do.
Yeah. What I really like is that, like, when I see when I'm just on social media and I'm just browsing and looking around and seeing what's trending and what's popular, I do see people that are hyper masculine, like really uh, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, really just pushing, don't get into your emotions. Emotions will lead you astray. Just focus on being very logical and rational and getting shit done. And I think there is some benefit to that. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I see people that are like really into their feelings and not really like progressing. And then both kind of being at odds with each other, saying, hey, you're not tapped into your emotions, you're just suppressing them. And the other saying, you're just so in your emotions, you've become a victim. And I've always believed that when you look at extremes, like they give you this idea of what's imbalanced, and you could find some sort of balance in the center. And I think that for myself, like, I I don't want to say like men have been attacked, but like the word masculinity has had like more of a negative tone to it. There's words like toxic masculinity, and you don't really see the word toxic femininity thrown around that much. But the flip side is, of course, there's positive masculinity. Not all masculinity is negative. And I really like the way that you framed it, which is, look, we're all going through shit and we need to feel those things. But once we're done feeling them, we need to come up with some game plan so that we could transmute this type of negative emotion or energy or feeling into something positive and really learn from it. Would that be an accurate description of kind of the way that you approach things?
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about the state of men in Western society, specifically in America. And I do agree that masculinity has been under attack for some time. testosterone levels are down. We've been treated as the enemy, unfortunately, for a while. And I don't think that masculinity is inherently toxic. And it's a systemic issue, right? When you talk about the traits that they're referring to when they refer to toxic masculinity, misogyny, aggression, to me, those are boyish traits, right? Those are not the traits that are expressed by a well developed man who I would consider to be masculine. And if you look at why that happens, it ties back to the destruction of the nuclear family and the fact that half of the children in this country are being raised by single mothers who are doing an amazing job. That's got to be the hardest thing in the world, to be a single mother. But especially now having a son of my own and reflecting on the things that I learned from my dad growing up, all of that stuff, how to be a man, it comes from my dad. And it comes from the positive male role models in my life. And without those, we don't pass from boyhood into manhood. And then you wind up with womanizing and misogyny and aggression. And those things are a major problem. And unfortunately, families have been destroyed in this country. And I don't think that it's going to be something that we can fix unless we start putting a focus back on making sure that men are raising their sons. And that's something that I'm passionate about. And one of the reasons that I love working with men.
Yeah, I agree with you. Being a single parent must be one of the most challenging things. When I'm just with my kids for just one weekend without my wife, I'm like, I really see how challenging it is.
Brutal.
Yeah, and I think what I want most people to really understand here is I've known you well enough to know that you're not saying that like women can't raise healthy men. You're just saying that, look, in an ideal situation, there are certain traits that if you grew up as a man, you could pass it on to a boy so much easier than having to learn masculine traits from your mother. Or if you have a single mother that has to be hyper masculine and maybe go overly masculine, you might start picking up on some of these boyish tendencies of like just needing to dominate or womanize or these things that would be classified traditionally as being on the toxic masculinity side. And I think it's very important that I believe that, hey, we have two hemispheres of the brain, our right side, our left side. One's more intuitive, one's more insightful, one's a little bit more creative. The other is more logical and rational. But we have something called the corpus callosum that joins the two hemispheres. And I believe that all of us need to practice women as well, like how to express their positive and or positive masculine and feminine sides to be a holistic human being.
Yeah, there's a reason that we have two parents, that it takes two people to create a child. We learn different things from our parents, right? The things that I learned from my mom make me capable of the emotional intelligence that we talked about before and being introspective. And if you grow up without a father, there's absolutely, I have so much respect for single mothers. And this is not downplaying what they do or trashing on them. This has more to do with the men. This is, hey, if you created a child, you need to be in their life, whether it's a boy or a girl, because you're teaching your son how to be a man and you're teaching your daughter how she should be treated by men. And if you have a child that grows up without a man in their life, a positive male role model, then you wind up with women who get into bad relationships, and that's like a cyclical thing. And you wind up with boys who look to popular culture for how they think that men should act. They see it in movies and on social media, and you wind up with these hyper aggressive, womanizing dudes that's not masculinity to me. That's somebody who never transitioned into manhood. Back in the day, there used to be rites of passage, and we don't have that anymore. And the rite of passage nowadays is a father teaching his son how to be a man.
Yeah, yeah, and I also think it's important. We were just talking about the single mothers, but single fathers who are raising daughters, they would have the same challenge. I know I would have the same challenge. I would say I'm pretty in touch with my emotions. When I think about my two daughters, like I do my best to stay an involved parent, but there are just certain things that my wife, because she's gone through those experiences, is just much more well equipped to teach them. And to your point, like I believe my job is to show them what a holistic man should be like, or someone that if they choose to date, hopefully they will look at someone like their father to be like that archetype of someone that they would look up to and find like value in.
If they choose to date, because maybe they won't. Hopefully, they just decide not to date at all, and they'll be good. No, you're exactly right. And I don't have a daughter, but if I wind up with a daughter one day, my role, besides keeping her safe and providing, is going to be to show her, like by how I interact with her and how I interact with her mother, how she should be treated by men in the world, so that when she runs into men that don't treat her well, it is an automatic, oh no, I'm not having anything to do with this person, because I have seen how a good man treats a woman, and that's the only thing that I will accept. I'll accept nothing less.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to switch gears a little bit, I don't think we've ever talked about like your connection with God. I know that you are a spiritual guy, but was this something that you've always had a connection with God growing up, or was this something that developed later in your life?
I was raised Catholic and spent my childhood going to church every Sunday. We did get to a point in my early teen years where my parents stepped away from the church and we didn't have to go anymore. And so I spent a number of years, you know, I would tell you I was Catholic and that I believed in God, but not really having a relationship with God. And it wasn't really until I got sober that I started praying and building a relationship again with God. When you're on drugs or drinking a lot and doing bad things, like I believe that the voice in our head and our soul that we call the conscience, I think that's the voice of God, right? And when you are numbing yourself to that degree, that voice goes away. It gets quieter and quieter until it goes away. And that's what allows people to do horrible things in addiction. That's what allowed me to kick in somebody's door and rob them. That's what allowed me to write bad checks. That's what allowed me to go into East Oakland and do horrible shit, because I didn't hear that voice had been sequestered for so long. It was basically all but gone. And then when you get sober and you hear that voice again, it's a very emotional thing to have it come back to you and to start processing how you really feel about how you've been acting that whole time. The relationship that I have with God today is something that I continue to work on. And I see some people get very emotional about their relationship with God. And I would like to get there. I'm not quite there yet, but I certainly do believe. I've been going to a Christian church for the last 6 months and exploring this new Christianity. And I've been enjoying it so far. And I'm going to continue to work on it because I know it's incredibly important. And I want to have that love for God that I see in some other people, and I want to understand and know and believe that I'm going to have a relationship with my son and my wife and my family for the rest of time, right? That it's not just this short clip that I get here in this lifetime with them.
Yeah, you know what I really loved about your story was that you talked about the more you took drugs, the more it just disconnected that connection to God, that little voice in your head. And I know that when I often will tell people, whatever is happening in life is that's actually what is supposed to happen in this moment. And then they'll always say, what about all these bad things? And if these are all like perfectly divine moments, like why would God ever create these like tragedies and needless suffering? And I think that what you explained to me was like a great example of like why bad shit happens, is that when you are disconnected from something greater than yourself, and you're just numbing yourself or trying to make yourself feel better, then your ability to do something to someone else that would be negative in order to get what you want would drastically increase, because that conscience, that voice is no longer there redirecting you. And in many ways, like when I look at people that commit crimes, politicians, white collar criminals, many times like I could go, wow, look at that politician. What a slime bag. He's the worst person ever, fucking destroying this country, blah, blah, blah. And I know both sides could say the exact same thing about their candidates. But when I look at it, I look at it the same way that you did, was like, hey, these people have no connection to God. This is why they live in that way. And I have compassion for them. Believe it or not, Biden, Trump, I have compassion for both of them. And at the same time, I could also view from an objective point of view that, in my opinion, neither of them seem to be doing what I believe would be best for our country, but still at the same time realize like these are human beings that have lost their way. And if they had a connection, they would definitely be behaving in a different manner. And I know what I said probably is like super controversial, but to me, this is how, when people ask me, why do I seem so grounded? And sometimes some people have just said, it just seems, you seem apathetic, not even grounded. It turns into something negative. Like, why don't you care about this stuff? And it's actually, I care so deeply of each individual that I could still see them as a human that lacks connection, as opposed to a piece of shit that is tearing our country apart.
Yeah, why aren't you out here with a burning pitchfork and signs and so flaming angry about everything? I get it, man. And one of the things that I really respect about you and that I hope to achieve and attain one day is that level of compassion. I struggle with compassion towards myself. I'm always my harshest critic, something that we've talked about. And then I struggle to be compassionate for other people. And like you said, uh, people don't start out evil. Everybody started out as a cute little baby at one point, and their environment and the things that they were exposed to and the people that taught them over the years created what today. And so it's something to think about, certainly when you're getting bent out of shape at somebody, that they might have had a life that you can't really imagine, and that was really difficult that made them turn out like this. But in the moment when you're feeling like fuck this dude, it's hard to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what I've taken it as, and it's still a work in progress for me as well. We had a long conversation yesterday about how our self worth is very much attached to how people respond and react to us. And I think as people that have run their own companies, and in our own way, I guess we're like public figures, right? It's really hard to parse out like, all right, I'm here to help people. And shit, here's someone, I wrote something that was supposed to be helpful, but this person here seems like they're responding in this really negative way or misinterpreting what I'm saying, and then really wanting to clarify, no, that's not what I meant. And then almost falling into this like, why am I trying to convince this person of some way of thinking when I already know deep down what my intentions are? And if that person can't receive it, what does that have to do with me? Why do I need to make sure like they still look at me positively? And when you were talking about like this ability to love others and not judge others, I found for myself that when I was judging other people or had a really difficult time like forgiving people or letting things go, almost 99% of the time, I realized for me it was, I need to judge myself less. I need to let things go. And as I worked on judging myself less, loving myself even when I wasn't achieving and accomplishing things, I believe like I started being less triggered by other people that I felt. Or I guess maybe what I'm really saying here is every time I was judging someone, it was actually like a reflection of a part of me that I hadn't fully accepted for myself.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I've noticed that the times when I get the most frustrated with somebody or I see something in somebody that I really detest, it's almost always a reflection of something that is inside of me that I don't like, or maybe it's a way that I was in the past that I am ashamed of or have regrets about. I almost always see that reflection is almost always there in those moments.
Yeah, and I know we have a common colleague that we always talk about is always selling something, and that's definitely something that I've been accused of in the past is just like, "All right, here comes Sabo. What bright idea is he gonna try to shove down our throat this week?" So, when someone else does it, I think, like, it always, like it's amplified for me because I know that was a part of me where it got to the point where I would go to parties, and then I would notice, like, the energy at the party shift, like, when I was about to go into, like, my story, and then someone finally was kind enough to just tell me, "Sabo, yeah, every time, like, you come in and we're talking about something, you'll just hijack the conversation and just start talking about whatever it is that is your flavor of the week." And yeah, like, working on your shadows has definitely been something, or working on my shadows has been something that has been super eye-opening, and it almost got to the point where I was like, oh man, like every time I get triggered by someone, just realizing there's yet another part of me that still hasn't been reconciled that I could shine the light on and work on. And actually, it's actually made, even though I was saying, like, oh, wow, like here's another part that I get to work on, I've actually been able to start shifting like my mindset towards, oh, wow, I get another part of myself to work on versus, ah, shit, here's another part of me that has been hiding that I didn't know was hiding and needed some TLC.
Yeah, that perspective is great. One of the things that I love is a perspective shift in the same way is when things are happening to me, bad things, right? Like, why, instead of why is this happening to me, it's this is happening for me and what am I going to become because of it, right? Going through addiction, losing everything. That was an incredibly painful experience. But looking back, that happened for me. I was on a bad path. I was an egomaniac. I, if had I continued down that path, I would not have been a well-adjusted, healthy, emotionally mature 40 something, 50 something year old male. I would have had a much different life. And because of that experience, I am who I am today. And looking back, I wouldn't trade any of that pain. And so that perspective shift has been incredibly powerful for me. And I think that's, it's not the same as what you're talking about, but that the way you're looking at things, I think is the same.
Yeah, I would say that's exactly what I was describing, but said in a much more eloquent, shorter way. Life isn't happening to you, it's happening for you. And one thing that I've realized is that it's very easy for me to look at my past. Hey, it's a few years ago. Okay, that was happening for me. But when I'm going through shit right now, it's very hard for me to go, oh, this is happening for me. Thank you. Thank you for yet another person that fucked up and did something that I have to go clean up. So, are you able to take this concept and bring it into the present moment so that while you're going through something, it doesn't feel like so emotionally charged while you're going through it?
As we're sitting here talking about this, I am thinking about what I'm going through right now, which is uncomfortable. I'm at a place in my career, in my life, where I have some changes going on, and it doesn't always feel good. And although there's a lot of exciting things happening in my life, and most people probably on the outside would say, wow, this all looks great. I feel I have a lot of mixed emotions about it and I'm processing things. And as we're sitting here talking about it, I'm thinking about the fact that a year from now, 3 years from now, I'm going to look back and think, wow, that had to happen for me to take this next step. I truly believe that we only grow through discomfort. And discomfort sucks, right? It's not fun to go through it, but you have to walk through it if you want to achieve the next level, right? Every time I put myself through something that's uncomfortable, I get a little bit better, whether it's something simple like taking an ice bath or a really hard workout or working through my deepest, darkest shit in therapy or going through rehab. All of those things make me better. And it's incredibly important for me that I continue to do that. And so as I think about what I'm going through right now, that gives me a little bit of solace knowing that I'm going to look back on this and hopefully the near future and realize that this happened for a reason and that it had to happen and that I'm way better off because of it.
Yeah. I don't think I've shared this story, but when I got the feeling it was time to come back to the cannabis industry, I started applying for jobs, and um I wasn't getting any responses. I probably sent over 250 resumes out to just random positions at random companies looking for sales and business development. And it actually got to the point, Willie, where I was like, okay, I'm not getting these interviews for these executive positions I'm looking for. Maybe I'll just go for a director level position. And when I went for director level positions, still I didn't get any responses. And then I went for manager positions and I still wasn't getting any responses. And then I was like, all right, I'll just get a sales gig. I know as a sales gig, I could sell a lot and earn a lot. It's not something I actually want to do, but I'll do it. And still didn't get any responses. And then finally, I was like, I will get a customer support job. I trust myself to just start at the bottom and I'll work my way up. And I got a interview with one of the biggest brands in California. I'm not going to name who they are, but after the first interview, I just asked the lady, I was like, "Hey, how did I do?" I was just curious, how did I did? This was my first interview in 10 years. And she goes, "You know what? I'm not supposed to say this right now, but we're not going to move forward with you." And then she goes, "We could have a off the record call about this." So we had a off the record call, and she's just, "Seibo, you interviewed well. You're way overqualified for this position, but I just didn't get a sense of who you were as a person. I know what you've done and what you've accomplished, but I just don't know who you are as a person, and that is very important to this company to like know who we're bringing in." And I said, "That's fair. That's fair." Cause I was definitely, I would say, more in like interview presentation mode versus just being casual and talking with you and just being myself. And that actually, it reminded me of something that my wife told me, which was, she's like, "Seibo, it's just not that fun talking to you anymore." And I go, "Why?" And she's, "Everything's like a life lesson now. You always bring it back to some life lesson." She's, "I'm not your client. Like, you don't need to coach me." And in many ways, like what that recruiter said to me and what my wife said to me, like it just all made sense all of a sudden. I was like, yes, I'm like, even to my wife, I'm not like the person that she married. And I've become this, spiritual, philosophical like guy that's just always talking about expansion of consciousness. And she's just like, "I just want to have my husband back." And in many ways, I was like, in my mind, I was like, "Don't you know people pay me for this advice? Like, they pay me a lot of money for this advice." So to hear you don't even want to hear this, like, really hurt my feelings. But then when that recruiter was just like, "I don't know who you are," it really made me look at like how I was interacting with my wife, how I was communicating with her. And I realized like, oh, as a coach, I started like identifying the parts of her that I'd like to improve versus just accepting her for who she is. And she could feel like that energetic shift. And so through that kind of experience of like, I can't tell you how humbling it is to be told you're not going to get a customer support job. It's just like, holy crap, I guess I just got to teach meditation for the rest of my life. Like the rest of the world doesn't value me anymore. That's like the impression that I got is, okay, like I'm going to need to be a meditation coach for the rest of my life. The corporate world has no value for someone like me. And just even thinking like everything that I've done in the past, I must have been at the right place at the right time and like riding someone else's coattails. And it really took me to this like really dark place. And during that time when I was sending out my resumes, when I wasn't getting bites, like I stopped meditating because I was like, hey, 90 minutes a day of meditating is a lot. Maybe if I spent this time like doing outreach instead, I'll just get more at bats. If I have more bats, like I'll get a hit sooner or later. And once I came to that epiphany, Willie, like my wife was like, just go back to meditating. Don't be so caught up about getting a job. If you don't get a job, like we could sell some assets. And, but in my mind, everything had to be like a certain way. And I was so attached to being like the CRO of some company and I had never even thought about becoming like a product guy for a company. So I kid you not, Willie, within 3 or 4 days of just meditating again and really focusing on connecting with God, like I just get this random LinkedIn email or LinkedIn message from someone that was like, hey, I know you're just teaching meditation right now, but if you have a few hours a week to help our company, we're looking for like a product designer. And then that actually became the job that I have today. And so it was just crazy to think how I went from this like hyper desperate, like just almost like forgetting everything that I learned and just, oh man, all this manifestation bullshit. I just must have been lucky, like this house, this new whatever, like it was all luck. And then just going back to like, all right, I'm going to will my way into becoming successful again. And then within just a few days of reconnecting with God and feeling like that comfort of, hey, this is an abundant world, you'll always be taken care of. And then boom, it was like I didn't even have to send out a resume for a job that I never thought like I could apply for a job to be head product designer, even if I designed all the products for my company. And it just worked out in a way that was even better than how I envisioned. And I guess I wanted to share that story with you because um, I think having faith in God, or it would have been very difficult for me to get through that had I not had a belief in something greater than myself.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that story with me. That's crazy. And that's something that I've thought about before too. If I was to decide that I no longer, want to be the CEO of my company, what would I do? I'm not really a formally trained executive being the CEO of a company that I didn't start myself and put up my own money and go through the process of actually building it. I'm not really that guy. It's something that I've shared about. I'm a founder. I'm not an executive. And so I've thought extensively about where do I fit into the world if I was to want to go get a job. And I've thought about the fact that, man, I don't know if I could even get a C suite job. I would probably get one, but I don't know that I would last there. I don't know that I'd perform well. I don't know that I certainly probably wouldn't enjoy it. And just as, like you're saying, as I was starting to process these things and to start making some moves in my life, opportunities just start popping up and just letting me know that, hey, there are things out here in the world for you to do, and it's all going to be fine.
Yeah, totally. And we don't have to talk about them. A lot of the projects that we're involved in now, to me, it was very synchronistic. And now I sit on the advisory of like a few different startups as well. And it's just interesting how things just coalesced again. And I believe that being connected to God, and that's why I always want to encourage you. I believe this connection in God is one of the best ways that I've been able to just trust. Like I have a very active mind. I love to think about stuff. And many times, like I could think about things to the point where I get excited about them. And then I think about them so much, like I almost come from like a fear based area. And to be able to just jump in and trust that things are going to work out has been a really great feeling. And I'm glad that we made the connection because I probably would have never joined Eco had it not been for your writing. So I know that your strategy of just like writing what's top of mind for you and sharing it with other people is helping a lot of people, myself included. And actually, like we're already at the top of the hour. I was like, dude, this is there's some more stuff that I wanted to get into, but in the vein of trying to keep my episodes consistently an hour long, I will save that for a future conversation. But one of the things that I always love to ask people before we end is I love to open up the floor for them. Like, what's top of mind for you, Willie? What would you like people that are listening to hear? And yeah, why is it important for you to communicate that out to them?
And it's an interesting question. It's very open ended. I do a lot of podcasts, but they're always cannabis related podcasts, and so I launch into my elevator pitch on being good operators and good stewards of the industry, and how it's so important that we help each other, and a rising tide lifts all boats. And this is obviously a different audience and a different podcast. I think if there's anything that I want people to think about, it's that what we talked about earlier about what the things that are happening in my life, the bad things, the things that are painful, the things that are uncomfortable. What is this doing for me? What is this teaching me? Where am I going to go because of this? Who am I going to be able to help because of this? Because all of the pain, all of the discomfort, all the challenging things that we go through in our lives are teaching us something. And that perspective shift is just incredibly powerful. So I hope that folks out there who are going through something maybe start to think about it a little bit differently and come to terms with it and maybe have a better experience because of it.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you even had the awareness to say, yeah, usually at this point of podcast, I just go into like the cannabis talking points of rising tides, raise all boats, be a steward of the industry, blah, blah, blah. This life happening for you, to me, this is one of the most important things that we could communicate to the people listening. Like, when I described that story to you, when I talked about I second guessed everything, I literally second guessed everything. Like, how did I end up at 5 companies that had successful exits? It just must have been like this person, that person, just all of these like really lucky things. And you know what that actually taught me, Willie, was I had been on this 3 or 4 year like manifestation kick where like literally everything that I pictured in my mind within like months we would have it, the chicken coop, the ducks, the self-sustaining farm, whatever. And as I was coaching people, they would tell me about their challenges and problems. And I'd be like, yes, I would take it in and process it. But I really wasn't like connecting with them, like being able to feel their pain. And if there's one thing that taught me last year was like, as I said, like I got to the point where I felt like everything that I did was based on luck. And I really understood what it felt like to feel hopeless and to feel like I had no value to society. And having that feeling is just, for me, turned me into number one, a much better coach, really being able to empathize with my clients. Number two, a much better husband, like really listening to my wife and understanding what she wants versus hearing what she's saying and then me interpreting what I think she means by that. And then just having a lot more empathy for people who can't pull themselves up by the bootstraps because they're in this state of being where they just don't have the willpower or support to do it themselves. And it taught me just a lot more humility, a lot more compassion. And I don't think I could have learned that had I not experienced like being pushed to the point of just feeling worthless. And even just sharing this story, like I'm feeling like this sense of like lightness of, okay, hey, now people know 9 months ago, I felt like worthless. And then 9 months later, now I'm in a position where there's so much abundance where I'm like, all right, what projects do I need to cut out of my life? And yeah, without that experience, I don't think I would be here and be so grateful for what I'm going through now. And then for the friendship and all the business that we're doing together in the future.
Yeah, no, that's dope. And certainly will be very helpful to people because I get a lot of messages on LinkedIn from people who are struggling to get a job and having much the same experience that you had, where they're saying they're sending out tons and tons of resumes and getting no response and not getting callbacks on first interviews. And it's an abundant universe. And if we keep trying and keep putting one foot in front of the other, the world will always provide, right? God will
Yeah.
always provide.
Yes, brother. All right. So for people that want to get in touch with you, Willie, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Willie McKenzie on LinkedIn, Willie McKenzie official on Instagram, or williemckenzie.com. Find me any of those places.
All right. Those will be in the show notes. So if you guys are interested, just check out the show notes. We'll have great ways for you to connect with Willie. And Willie, thank you so much for your time. I know you are super busy in the middle of a move, starting a new chapter in your life. So I wish you the best of luck to have peace this week, to get everything squared away, and to have the smoothest transition into Nashville as possible.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it. It's always a blessing to chat with you, and so I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, hell yeah. Look forward to what we're building in the future. And yeah, we'll be back next week with another awesome episode. And lots of gratitude for you showing up today, Willie.
Thanks, man.
All right, y'all. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. It was a really awesome time to spend with one of my good friends, Willie McKenzie. If you enjoyed the podcast, please leave a comment, leave a review, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button. Help me grow this podcast so I could do more of them. And I will see you guys next week with another fabulous episode of the Silicon Valley to Spirituality Show.